To Wyoming 2030, learning happens everywhere. I'm Bob Beck. I'll be hosting and moderating our discussion. Wyoming is, of course, emerging from the COVID-19 pandemic while we're facing some budget challenges as well. And so what has and has not changed during the pandemic. We're also going to be looking at how we cultivate connections across community to support young people in their learning and to ensure every student has access to high quality education, a value that is woven into Wyoming's DNA. So over the course of our next 90 minutes together, we will hear perspectives from respected national education policy leaders. Our state superintendent is joining us, and other voices that point to innovative strategies that go beyond seat time to dynamic, connected, and quality learning. So we're going to have some presentations coming up. First, I want to thank all of our sponsors that you can see on the screen there for all the folks that have helped bring all of us together. And I want to also now introduce some of our presenters, and we're going to start our roundtable discussion now. I want to start off with Dr. Terry Peterson, who's the Education Advisor for the C.S. Mott Foundation and the Senior Fellow at the College of Charleston and Riley Institute at Furman University. Dr. Peterson, thank you for joining us. We'll also have on this part of the discussion Jillian Balo, who's the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, as well as Michelle Sullivan, who helped put all this together, the Director of the Wyoming Afterschool Alliance. Dr. Peterson, welcome, and we can kick things off with you.
Thanks, Bob. It's really good to be with everyone. My connection to Wyoming has been a number of brief and very positive encounters. It started actually as a young boy traveling from a small farm in northern Wisconsin to visit an uncle near Lusk. It has periodically continued working on some education issues over quite a few years. Despite these positive experiences, I don't pretend to be an expert on Wyoming education. However, I would like to share some trends, some thoughts. Hopefully they might help you define what needs to be done to better cultivate connections across Wyoming to help many more young people, the workforce, families, thrive in these very, very challenging times. And if you get inspired from all of us here today, there's actually some new federal stimulus money that's coming to Wyoming in schools and daycare and childcare and other areas that you actually could perhaps put those monies to these purposes we're going to talk about today to get started on a journey until 2030. In many communities and schools, as you well know, the pandemic is causing learning losses, health issues, parents losing their jobs, lack of socialization, lack of childcare, and food insecurity. Hopefully by the summer, normalcy might be possible, but many of these negative impacts will last for years, and we need to think about how to address them. Yet even before the pandemic, many were observing that we were not adequately preparing our children and youth for the current creative and technological times. For example, if you look at the 2020 100 best paying jobs in Wyoming, you will see that most require some special or technical skill, 1 or 2 year certificate, a 2 or 4 year degree or more. And many clearly require the capacity to organize groups, use technology, and be creative problem solvers. Now, in light of all that, let me focus on 2 big areas of education and learning that perhaps you want to discuss more later. First, to compensate for the pandemic learning losses and disruption, the initial reaction might be something like this. Let's narrow up the curriculum, just focus on drill and kill and reading and math until those kids get it. That might have been the solution for the economy and society 50 years ago, but not now. Remember, we're in a creative and technological driven economy and society. So why not support teachers and school leaders to make learning engaging and inspiring through project-based learning and individual and group work, drawing on teachers' passions as well as expertise in the community from volunteers, retirees, businesses, colleges, arts, and cultural resources. Why not use the excitement of the arts, service learning, and discovery in STEM subjects to motivate children and youth to solve problems? Work hard, yes, and work smart. A second area I'd like you to think about. The recent learning losses, both academically and socially, for many students requires us to think differently about time. How can we develop and offer many more after-school and summer opportunities and partnerships in every community, starting now perhaps with the stimulus money, and then until 2030 expanding what you're doing. Work with schools, parents, volunteer, cultural and youth groups, employers, to expand students' horizons, interests, and skill sets. And that's really a good way to help them catch up and accelerate learning. Now, some might think of after school and summers as something for young children, preschool, early grades, and they are, and they're very, very important. But also think about middle and high school students. Many of them can really benefit from internships, apprenticeships, co-op programs, dual enrollment opportunities, community service options, and entrepreneurial projects in after school and summers. Unfortunately, many children, youth, and families do not have access to these opportunities. A just released study nationwide and in Wyoming found that the number of students left without after school in Wyoming is on the rise. That's the wrong direction. Listen, please, carefully to this. There are now more than 43,000 children in Wyoming where the parents would enroll their children in after-school program and youth if one were available to them, was accessible and affordable. So wouldn't it be exciting if by 2030 together in each of your communities and statewide, you did your part to provide those 40,000 children and families with engaging, accessible, affordable after-school and summer opportunities? Just think about the positive impact on learning, engagement, community and schools. And also, by the way, this is a very, very good way to help with job recovery and economic development. A lot of parents can't work full-time in order to gain employment benefits because their children have to be supervised. So really killing two birds with one stone. And this positive impact is no longer theoretical. This is a very, very important study I'm going to share with you that just came out. For almost 25 years, a group has been studying children from 3 till now 26. And what they're finding is that both high quality early education and after school organized activities during elementary and middle school are linked to higher academic achievement in high school. That's very important, but they continue to have a positive impact into young adulthood. Now that's powerful. That's a good use of money and a good return. So in summary, your work now in schools, out of school, in nonprofits, in partnership with community and cultural and business groups, you can make and cultivate learning everywhere, anytime. And if you do this, you in Wyoming will be paid a big dividend in a better workforce, a better engaged citizenry all across Wyoming. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson, for that. Let's slide over now to our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Jillian Balo, and welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Love your background. Go Pack. And thank you, Michelle, so much for just hosting this incredible conversation today. As Dr. Peterson and I prepared just a little bit beforehand, it's like we're reading from the same script, and I don't think that's by coincidence. It's because a lot of us are thinking about the same things. I really struggled a little bit today deciding how to begin my comments. And ultimately, I think I need to provide this disclaimer. As a state leader, I enjoy the opportunity to be engaged in discussions at the federal and the state level about policies and frameworks and statutes and activities. Nonetheless, I know without a doubt that the most important decisions about children's growth, development, and learning take place in the home, in the school, and in the community, not at the state or the federal level. That's never rang more true than it does today. And so I begin today with just a little bit of gratitude for all of you and the impact that you have on the lives of Wyoming's children and youth. Your work really does inspire me to humbly have those state and national discussions that support the work that you do and help just build a strong framework and protective layer around the work you do to impact youth. Dr. Peterson, thanks so much and welcome virtually to Wyoming. I enjoyed your story, stories of old, and it's really wonderful to hear your perspective on Wyoming, but also in total on what this looks like. So some of you may know that I had the opportunity in 2020 to serve as the president of the National Organization for State Superintendents. And during my acceptance speech, which was in November of 2019, I talked very personally about my platform, which was called Beyond the Bell. I know firsthand as a parent that it's not one teacher or one parent or one program that ensures children's success. It's all of us working together and communicating. And I shared that, and my platform was supposed to be really me going around, working across systems and really sparking discussions, igniting discussions about what it means to communicate and work across systems so that the success that our children have after school and outside of school connects more closely with what happens in school. So of course that all changed on March 15th. And in hindsight, it wasn't all bad. As school doors closed, the needs of our learners certainly did not change, but they did shift in priority. We weren't thinking about assessment or accountability or seat time. What we were thinking about was, were our children fed? Were their families fed? Are our children safe? Do they have access to academic activities virtually, remotely, however that looks? Are they continuing to receive the necessary resources and services, especially those who are on individualized education plans? And did they have access to proper social interaction despite the pandemic and the isolation that we faced as a society? And what we realized as we continued to reflect throughout the pandemic is that the school really is the epicenter, or at least the coordinator for children. And schools scrambled. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, funding followed that. But as has become kind of cliche, never let a good crisis go to waste. We started looking as education leaders, as community members, as parents, for opportunities, and began to realize that just getting back to normal was not going to be sufficient, that this was a time that we could all grow. So here we are. My time as CCSSO, or the Council of State School Officers President, is over. And I didn't get to step foot into one meeting in person, but I did get to spread the word virtually quite a lot. And what I realize across the spectrum, but especially in Wyoming, is that there are a number of opportunities that we can leverage. Specifically related to today's conversation, we have experienced an enormous disruption in our communities. And as Dr. Peterson said, there's no curriculum, no program, no one person that is going to drive, sort of bridge that gap. It's all of us working together. It's rethinking school. Hats off to the State Board of Education and our Wyoming legislature for engaging in the conversation about a profile of a graduate, where we really build a sustained conversation and arrive at a shared agreement about what a community-owned successful student and graduate looks like. And I'll tell you what, folks, it doesn't depend on seat time in school or on credit hours earned, but it's that plus the skills, the behaviors, and the experiences that we want all of our children to experience outside of school as well as inside of school. We also, as Dr. Peterson mentioned, have an opportunity to address learning loss, set some state priorities and local priorities, not just in the school, but across systems at the community level for how the new CARES money and how the existing CARES money might be spent. So if you're a community service provider, after school program, early education, please make sure that you're having those conversations at the local level with your school district to determine what your goals are that you have in common and how you can use CARES money to move those forward. Another opportunity that we realize, but we may not realize it all the day or all the time, is that our students are resilient. They're much more adept at this change that has thrown us all for a loop than we gave them credit for. They pivoted to virtual learning better than we did as adults. They pivoted to the isolation and found ways to stay connected. And now in sort of the new normal of in-person school, they're doing really, really well. You see, I like to think that public education has for a very long time, my entire career and my entire education growing up in Wyoming, has been that public school is a box that children and families fit into. The pandemic has given us an opportunity to really think about that and think about public education as the education that belongs to all of us. We have a responsibility to provide education, not just in our school buildings, but beyond our school buildings. And we have a really wonderful opportunity to leverage the opportunities that the pandemic and other events have presented to us. So I'll end kind of where I began and say that my job as a national and a state leader is to really work on the framework that helps you do your work. I want to be your megaphone for that. You inspire me to do this work, to have these tough conversations about policy and about framework. And again, the very best work is, and the credit goes to you. And I thank you. And I just want you to know one more time that I'm inspired every day to do my job as state superintendent because of the impact that you have on children. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Balo. I should mention that in our chat function, you can write questions or things you would like any of our panelists to answer, and we'll get to it when we get to that point. So just want to mention that that's available to you. So thanks again, Superintendent Balo. Let's now move to Michelle Sullivan, who is the director, of course, of the Wyoming Afterschool Alliance. Good flow here because Superintendent Balo set you up quite nicely. Go ahead.
I was going to, yes, I feel well set up. Hopefully I won't be too redundant, but I'll have a couple of comments here. So first of all, also thank you to Superintendent Balo and to Dr. Peterson for joining us today. I also want to thank everyone who's joining us on the call today, and acknowledge really that many of you who are participating are situated in contexts where you're really seeing in real time the impacts not only of the pandemic, but of the fractures that have emerged in our communities. And as challenging as it has been, I believe we are at a particular moment of both risk and opportunity that will require each of us in our respective roles to think about ways we contribute to the conditions for young people and families to feel like they belong and to heal. And so I'd like to talk just a little bit about some work from the Center for the Developing Child around resilience, and Jillian mentioned this. If some of you were on last week, you would have heard Dr. Amy Speaker talk about this, the concept of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And these are experiences that literally get under your skin and have the potential to impact your long-term health from the stress that you might experience in your early years. But just as we're learning a lot about ACEs, we're also learning a lot about the science of resilience and the factors that bolster our ability to withstand adversity. Understanding why some children do well despite adversity can help us to design policies and programs that help more children to reach their full potential. And the way the Center for the Developing Child kind of describes this is they invite us to visualize the balance or a seesaw, and protective experiences and the growing of adaptive skills on one side have the potential to basically counterbalance significant adversity on the other. Resilience is evident when a child's health and development are tipped in the positive direction, even when a heavy load of factors is stacked on the negative side. Now, all children in Wyoming have faced significant challenges over the course of this year, and those of you who work with those who are in particularly vulnerable situations recognize that they are going to be facing further challenges. But research shows that no matter the source of hardship, the single most common factor for children who end up doing well is having the support of at least one stable and committed relationship, whether it be with a parent, a caregiver, or another adult. These relationships provide the personal responsiveness and scaffolding that buffer children from the developmental disruption of adversity. I hope we can all point to that teacher, secretary, a mentor, or someone in our lives who saw something in us. We know that these relationships often happen outside the classroom in places like after school and summer experiences, but really all across the community. And they make a difference. Just to kind of put this in perspective too, as it relates to how we think about working together, there's a large analysis related to what Dr. Peterson noted of 61 after-school studies that showed that high-quality after-school experiences and extended learning improve attendance in school, they improve student behavior and achievement. So to me, that's such an important thing to think about, how we this work complements the other so that we really create conditions together for young people's potential. As Dr. Peterson mentioned, this new report, which I put in the chat, America After 3, found that there are about 14,000 kids that were in after school in Wyoming before the pandemic began. And there were another 43,000, a little over 43,000, who would participate if there were the opportunity. 39% of parents actually surveyed in that study said that there were not experiences available in their communities for their kids. So when I think about building back better, and I imagine what could be true for children and families in our communities in 2030, I hope that we can think about how we in communities help to contribute to young person's context for belonging, and that we recognize the power of those rich experiences that complement the school day and contribute to all young people's resilience. Learning is certainly not relegated to a building, and I hope we can think together about how we create the connections in communities to do that more effectively as we go forward and emerge from this challenge that we face. And as both Jillian and Dr. Peterson said, I think as we as adults recognize the potential of all young people to participate and pursue their passions, whether those be in an after-school context, through civic contribution, apprenticeship, or other ways that we help find and build community, we can transition from this pandemic with a commitment that we can all work better together. And I'd like to just propose a kind of idea that actually Superintendent Balo and I have discussed, and also others, the idea of a commitment to the summer of community learning and connection as a way of jump-starting some of those relationships and building resilience. And if anyone's interested, we'd love to have more of a conversation about that. But as a way of kind of getting and kickstarting our broader conversation, I'd like to turn it over to Joan Evans, who is going to talk about one effort that's already been happening in Rawlins and is a great example of how when we begin to work together across public and private sectors, great things can happen. Among Joan's many roles, she coordinates the Sinclair Company's Wyoming outreach. She was engaged in public service for over 26 years and currently focuses her efforts on supporting unique community-based projects. Some of you may know Joan as an appointee and director of the Wyoming Department of Workforce Service, which she transitioned from both Governor Friedenthal and also into Governor Meade's tenure. And with that, Joan, I will turn it over to you and welcome you to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I've really had the privilege of working with the Sinclair companies since 2015, really in two different roles. One, to support a vision that the CEO, Ross Matthews, had to support education in the community of Rawlins, and also to support their efforts in engaging with our Wyoming state partners in the legislature and state government. So it's a pleasure to be part of the Sinclair companies for some really exciting activities. In 2015, Ross Matthews, the CEO of Sinclair Companies, approached me with a vision. He had a vision that the quality of education in Rawlins, Wyoming, and I grew up in Rawlins, so I am really well versed on the community, that the quality of education in Rawlins would be a reason to live there. It would be a reason that when he and others were recruiting and retaining a workforce for the refinery, just 6 miles down the road in Sinclair, would be a reason that the families would want to come, and it would be a reason that families that already live there would want to stay. Supporting this vision would really do a couple of things. He felt like it was the right thing to do. How can the private sector and a corporation like Sinclair Oil Corporation engage productively with education and other partners in the community? He felt like that was the right thing to do. And secondly, it would help improve the odds of recruiting and retaining a skilled workforce that is necessary to keep the refinery going. He really had this vision, but he didn't know how to engage and didn't know how to accomplish it. So really the effort started by talking. We just started talking to education partners in the district, education partners in higher education in the community, community stakeholders, and talking about what the needs of the community are and what the challenges that the education community felt like it was facing. And the list was very long. And so we had talks about, housing for teachers, retaining teachers, graduation rates, all of these things, but it really centered back on the fact that more than 50% of kindergarten students that took the pre-K assessment to enter kindergarten were not successfully completing that assessment. And so each time we went back to talking about other challenges, it really came back to the fact that the students entering kindergarten were not prepared. So as we kind of started to flesh that out, we felt like that was a very logical place to start. If we could build a strong foundation that everything else could grow on, we would see success at other touch points along the way. And we were dealing with many families that were bilingual, and many students in the community that aged 3 to 5 were not attending any kind of formal preschool. And so the partnerships were key. And I think it really ties into a lot of the conversations from our previous speakers on how do you build those networks for support? How do we provide an opportunity, that context for belonging, like Michelle just said? How do we touch young people that haven't had a touch point in a place to connect in the community before? And I think this really ties in with what Michelle talked about with the resilience, providing an opportunity very, very early for that connection with adults. And so we really engaged the community around a purpose for improving. If you look at, if you want to talk about data, which Ross is always like, how are you going to prove that our investment in our partnership really made a difference? And so, looking at the data, how can we show that, we started out saying more than half of our young 5-year-old students are not entering kindergarten prepared, and now we're at 90%. You know, how do we show that? So we have that data, but some of the very cool things that I can remember from a few years ago around this effort, and this effort also had a heavy emphasis on improving access to literacy for the birth to 5th grade population. And so we did things like support a children's library where every student could have access to about, say, $7 worth of scholastic books every month of their choosing to build their own library. The Dolly Parton Imagination Library for birth to 5 years, so that before kids even entered school, they were building up a library, receiving a book every month for them. And all of this was done not only with the resources and support from Sinclair Oil Corporation, but in partnership with resources that the school district and other community partners had too. So we really worked together. But one of the really fascinating events that we had a few years ago was a literacy night at the school, where that day the students could receive their books that they had ordered through the book program. And we had over 650 adults and children and grandparents attend this event to share in a meal and to share in an event that supported their children in accessing literacy. And I'll tell you, to get 650 people out on a school night in a small community like Rollins was actually just so inspiring. So, you know, engaging everyone around that purpose, really finding a way to forge those connections. And as Dr. Peterson said, the work that we're cultivating now will pay off in dividends. And we have moved now to where, you know, as a private sector partner, we approached the district and cultivated an idea. And now we are full partners in this effort and serving over 50 students a year in the pre-K readiness program. We've been able to distribute thousands of books, and we've been able to do other efforts in partnership with the Albogan Foundation and other groups to have various touch points along the educational spectrum there in Rollins. So this is such a fun thing to talk about. It's very inspiring and can be easily replicated in other communities by just sitting down, having a conversation, and not reinventing the wheel, but pulling everybody together around a common purpose.
Well, thank you very much. Trying to get all my stuff clicked here, so I appreciate it. We're going to move to our panelists now, and if you look at the screen, you can see all the folks that will be joining us, including Joan, and then we will get to them. What I would like everybody to do is, and we'll start with Matt Stranigan here, is just kind of go through and tell us a little bit about how you see yourself fitting into this system. So, and some of your thoughts as we move forward to 2030. So Matt, why don't we go ahead with you to start?
Well, first of all, I want to say good morning and maybe good afternoon now. And it's an honor to be here and speaking with everybody. My role, I guess my background is relevant here. I was a teacher in Laramie County School District #1, taught social studies at Cheyenne East High School, served as an administrator at Cheyenne Central High School for 23 years. My last 5 years, I served as the building principal and finished my year as an assistant superintendent of schools in Laramie 1, and still do some part-time work for the district. But my primary job and my passion, I was so thrilled to hear Dr. Peterson's comments. My primary job is to direct a program for the last 20 years called We the People, the Citizen, and the Constitution. And in light of really not the events from this week, but in light of the events that have transpired, maybe looking back for the past 15 years, my job is to work with teachers around our state. And I want to preface my comments by saying this program is nonpartisan. It's used to be funded through the Center for Civic Education, through the Education Democracy Act, through Congress. But years and years ago, when we lost federal funding, among others, private citizens stepped up early on. The John P. Albogan Foundation worked to develop an endowment for the We the People program and work in concert with the University of Wyoming. where we are now. I think my role in the context of this discussion is, I think it begins and ends so many of these discussions with our role as citizens. We hear that a lot, but I think the last couple of years we really struggled to, how do we define that? Some of the issues that have taken place not only this week, but are really ongoing. Citizenship comes with a lot of responsibility. We hear a lot about rights, but it really comes with a lot of responsibility. And I'm not sure we're doing a tremendous job in schools. You know, we talk about what is high quality education. I think high quality education based on research, again, I agree with what Dr. Peterson said, engaged learning. And then what engages students? High levels of participations, an exciting curricula, and it's been common since studies in the 1960s to studies today. The quality of the teacher and who that teacher is makes a difference. So I think it's a big problem. I mean, we tend to put labels on great programs, and there are great programs. I feel the program I'm affiliated with is just that. It attracts very high quality teachers. And again, I use that term again, but teachers in this program really have to work a lot harder. It has a great activity that engages students in the classroom, but it is predicated on having teachers that have a high degree of content instruction. So again, I think my role is to support teachers, make this program aware to a lot of people. I think it's important for this dialogue about the role of the citizen to engage. The citizen is really becoming more and more important. I think the good thing is, as we face the loss of funding in Laramie County School District number 1, they're trying to balance how do they deal with a cut of $18 million. The difference is we've thrown a lot of money at education, but caring really cost nothing at all. And I think if we can find parents engaged, communities that engage, and we actually care about the students, we can go a long way to creating an environment we're all proud of, and where students and those students that are most at risk, that we can reach those.
Hey, why don't we jump next to Liz? Liz, do you want to? Love to hear some of your thoughts as well.
Sure. Liz Cassidy, Sheridan County YMCA. I'm actually been the executive director for 3 years, and before that, I was the after-school director right out of grad school. So I always joke it was my first adult job. And just to piggyback on so much that's been said, Michelle talked about belonging a lot, and I'm a firsthand example of a hard home life, but a really great community. And a lot of people, for lack of anything else in terms of accountability, I didn't want them to find out poor choices I made. And having been in a role with after school long enough, one of the telltale of that, just people who care, I think was just mentioned. I have kids who now need to do community service required by court. And I can always tell a kid who grew up in the Y programs, because the first thing they say to me on the phone is, Liz, I wasn't drinking. And they want you to know right away it was a traffic ticket, or it was whatever it is. And that sense of wanting to be part of the community is huge. And so I think it goes both ways. You want kids who want to be part of that community, who don't want to let down those who've cared about them, and to make sure there's those adults who care. I couldn't agree more in terms of those after school hours being important. And at our Y, we have a traditional after school program with kids from all over the district, but then we have a lot of things in terms of, we have a boys and girls choir, and just trying to find staff that understand they're teaching choir, but they're really being there for kids, and that's their number one priority. So we have 50 boys who've auditioned for this choir, 50 boys in Sheridan, Wyoming. And half of them will tell you, I don't know about singing, but I'll do any program Tyler puts on. And so I think we have to think about our role in terms of, be it chess club or choir, whatever it is, these are just modes to get to kids and get that sense of belonging with them. And as part of that, I mean, I think everyone would nod in agreement that that's what we need. But unfortunately, I can't pay as much as Dairy Queen can for an after-school staff youth worker. And so it's really challenging, as we say, we need more folks in their lives, caring about them, being consistent. And yet for a college kiddo, Starbucks, Dairy Queen, any of those type of jobs pay more. And so we have to make our programs as affordable as possible, or else parents start having that conversation of, well, they could just go home. And so you want to make sure that it stays affordable, and also pay staff the wages they need to justify continuing to come play dodgeball and have conversations with kids and track them through their elementary and junior high years. So I guess I would agree with all the things in terms of belonging and building those relationships, and our youth workers have to be paid a wage that makes it possible for them to stay in that career.
Thank you. Again, if you have questions for our panelists, we'll get to them after they give their presentation. So just go ahead and put those questions on the chat group, or any comments you'd like to share with folks as well. Let's go to Beck now, who will talk about things that she sees. Hi.
Hi, I'm the Carbon County 2 School District BOCES Director, and I've held this position for about a year and a half. I have been very fortunate to essentially build it how I have seen fit. I chose to go ahead and make early childhood one of our major pillars for our program, along with education for our 3rd to 8th grade children, as well as our senior citizens. We had already in place a kindergarten readiness program for Saratoga and encampment. Sometimes it was attended, sometimes it wasn't attended. In the last 2 years, we have had stellar attendance, and this is for both children and their parents. We put together essentially between 9 and 10 months of lessons and take-home activities that prepare children for school and prepare the family for the transition into public school. It makes for an easier classroom for our teachers in the long run, and also gives our parents a lot of different tools to utilize at home. Growing up, I am a Wyoming native and grew up in Dayton, Wyoming, and I take so much of what I want to instill in Carbon County too from my experience there. We had wonderful superintendents, we had amazing principals, and it was the first 4-day school week in the state. And that gave us the opportunity to have Friday activities. And there were so many different things that we could do, as far as going into natural resources or doing science-esque things. And I always found myself really inspired, and we had mentors and we were building community. And like everybody's been saying, students were feeling like they weren't left behind. And we could explore so many subjects at that time, and it was so exciting. And I'm trying to set that up here in Carbon County School District too. We had many things that were planned, but as we've all come to face with COVID, we had to cancel many of those. And we got to transition some of them online, which is exciting because we can move forward in the tech world. But we also have a lot of kids that prefer to do things hands-on, like many of you guys were talking about. And moving forward, we're trying to bridge that gap between the kids who do better things online or do better hands-on. And so we're looking at different options for that, which is pretty exciting. We also have our senior citizen component in Carbon County School District 2, and we've done classes that are just as simple as how to use your phone, which doesn't seem like a big issue to most of us who grew up with cell phones or grew up utilizing computers throughout school, but that's part of our communities that actually, given the opportunity to interact with our students, can teach our students so many things, but we need to teach them too. And so ideally in the future, when we can get everybody back together, the kids will actually be teaching these tech classes to the seniors. We'll be having like a community growing opportunity and getting older mentors, which I'm pretty excited about. But I guess I see my role as the individual who is in education, but I also get to bridge that gap with my parents and all of the community members that I get to serve.
Okay, Thank you very much. Let's jump now to Representative Freeman, who has a lot of perspectives, being both in the legislature, which is pondering some cuts of education, as well as being a teacher and watching it from that end as well. So, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. I don't know where to start because I'm kind of contrary to what a lot of people have talked about today. I had a great home life and I had a lousy primary school experience. My 5th grade teacher called me a little hoodlum and said that I would never graduate from high school. I've overachieved. And I take responsibility for a lot of the stuff that I did, but I didn't have any other outlet. So I understand the importance of after-school programs. My dad looked at my report card at the end of the 8th grade and said, "What grade are you the most excited about?" And I very much frustrated my teacher, who gave me 1 grade below the lowest grade that you could get for citizenship. And I pointed to that one. And the next thing I know is I'm at St. Mary's High School in Stockton, California, a prep program, and 26 miles away from my peers. And that was the turnaround that I had in my life. I had several very good teachers, and I had 1 exceptional teachers in service learning, and internships and community service was very important. It wasn't a punitive thing. It was something that you wanted to be part of, and that banished me for life. I got through college, and I spent 23 years in an alternative school where we looked at service learning and experiential education and internships and community service, not as a punitive things, but as a place to learn. Overused, but never quite understood is that takes community to educate a child, and I really believe that. I taught at a traditional high school for 9 years and realized that there's not a whole lot of difference between alternative students and traditional students. The major difference is there is an acute event happening in their lives, whether it's a death of someone close or a pregnancy, not even the person themselves, but it's the family in crisis. So when I was in the legislature, I was very big proponent of education all the way through pre-K, K-12. I also believe that if the system isn't providing you what you need, the charter schools or private schools are important. I also kind of led or was part of the posse that said, let's stop punishing teachers and let's empower them, like what Dr. Peterson says, let them teach to their passions. And I think that that's very important. Like one of the previous panelists said, is I came at the alternative school when it was starting, so there was nothing, and we got to put it together our way, and it was academic, but it was also focused to becoming part of the community, and our troubled youth didn't feel like they were part of the community, and we made them part of the community, which was very important. The last thing that I think is often overlooked, and it's probably the only thing that I wish I was still in the legislature for, is to promote career and technical education. Wyoming is a different state, and as other states are pushing towards computer programming and advanced manufacturing and stuff like that, especially in Sweetwater County, we still need welders, and we need electricians, and we need mechanics, and we need those kind of people. And yet they're pushing pushing students away from that. And the worst economic decision that I ever made in my life, not professionally or emotionally, is not to go to work for one of the Trona mines, because I would have made 2 to 3 times as much money, probably closer to 3 times the amount of money. And those jobs are there, and they're challenging, and they're changing, and we discount them. So with that as a background, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be with my fellow panelists, and I'm glad I'm not in Cheyenne. Thank you.
I think we both are glad we're not there, at least today, but we'll see how all things play out. But John, I also think we had the same 5th grade teacher, so we should compare notes at some point. Let's move on to Truman, who has actually probably a perspective on some of the things John talked about. Go ahead, Truman.
Hi, Bob. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Truman Solverud. I'm a special education teacher at Whiting High School in Laramie, and I guess I'm in the trenches, working directly with families and students. I bring, I think, a unique perspective as I was in the business community for most of my life, and I'm a recent graduate of KU and UNC, and a relatively new teacher. And I think I've definitely found my place working in alternative education. I'm just delighted. I really didn't know where this conversation was going, but I'm thrilled at the direction it's taken, because I think we're kind of a microcosm of all the things we're now talking about at a state level. We do all of these things every day right now, but feel like a little bit of an island in doing those. So our alternative model, we're individualizing, we're doing hand-on project-based learning, trying to meet our kids where they're at, to help them get their needs met educationally. We are spending a lot of time with being trauma informed and trying to make sure that our relationships are substantial, that our kids know we see them, we're giving them fresh starts. All of these things to get them to the finish line and help them transition to life after school. What we're finding now is interesting, and I think if there's a silver lining of this whole COVID experience, is that this increased awareness of students' mental health, and the fact that we're spending a lot more time talking about how are our kids doing, because what we're running into in the students that aren't thriving, it's something that's outside of our 7 hours a day that we have with them, and are they school ready? So we're spending a lot of time identifying barriers for students, what's getting in the way, and a lot of those times it's not anything that's happening here in the building. It's a parent that's out of work, it's unstable housing situations, it's mental health issues that stemming from trauma or other experiences that they're having. So to have these conversations about these partnerships and looking at the community as a whole and how can we support families, I think is huge. And I think the trickle down by lifting up our families and doing is to have more sustainable success, not necessarily replacing families. Sorry about that. Not necessarily replacing families, but giving them the tools that they need to help their students be school ready, access to housing, to healthcare, to nutrition. All of these things are a big issue in Albany County, especially now. So that's kind of where to see us having this conversation as a state educational entity I think is awesome, and I'm excited for the direction we're heading.
Okay, well, we'll get to some questions, and there's one that I want to ask that Rhonda asked at the very start of our discussion. Is getting the school district to even entertain the idea of partnering with us? I realize we no longer hold our before and after school program in the schools. However, even before COVID, we struggled at the school district to partner with our program at all. We have absolutely no support from our district prior to COVID or since. So any ideas on how Rhonda will be able to resolve that problem?
Well, I'll start, Bob, with a stab in. Hi, Rhonda. It's good to see your name in the chat. And I guess what I would say is keep trying. And I know that's not great. However, there is an influx of new federal funding, and one of the guardrails for that new federal funding is addressing the learning loss. The only way, and Dr. Peterson alluded to this, as did Michelle and many of the other speakers, the only way to do that is in a holistic and encompassing manner. There's not one program, one curriculum, one point in time that's going to make the difference. It's all of us together. And I think whether we're educators in the school district or community providers or librarians, our higher ed partners, after school programs, We the People, and other great activities that students can be engaged in. It's not one of those that's the silver bullet, it's all of that combined. As we look forward to accepting these new federal funds, again, one of the guardrails set by the federal government is to address the learning loss. So I would really encourage you to continue to keep that line of communication open with the school district and other providers in your community, and try to find some goals that you have in common that you may be able to use some of those CARES funds for.
Anyone else on that question? Yeah.
Hi, Rhonda. I think maybe an immediate answer, if that's what you're looking for, is maybe an individual. Brian Cox is the middle school administrator principal at Johnson Junior High School. I believe their free and reduced rate is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70%. He is also a board member on the Boys and Girls Club. And I think the answer to your question, sometimes it's just the getting to the right person. Everybody's busy, but I think finding somebody whose focus is really to provide help to all those kids, sometimes as I think a number of people have mentioned, whether the program is geared more to elementary age or middle school or high school age, there's a lot of different activities and needs that are provided, be it youth alternatives or in-house school programs, as I mentioned. But I think Brian Cox, being a board member of Boys and Girls Club, he has that, he's within the network where he might be working with colleagues who have said, who could help with this? And maybe YMCA and your organization is one of those immediate answers.
Terry?
Those are great answers. By the way, the panelists have been just spectacular. A lot of folks, I've been in education a long time, you can tell by my gray hair and wrinkles, but some folks can't get out of the box that Jillian described. They still think it's everything happens 8 to 3 and 180 days. And those 180 days in the box are very important, but they become far more effective and magnified if you can then find partnerships outside. So I'm wondering if you might find some colleagues in the community, in the business community, or parent leaders, or community leaders who might go meet with you, with the school folks, and find out what their concern is. It might be what I found in this issue of using school facilities after school, and sometimes one of the simplest barriers is the janitor. The hours don't match. The after school program leaves the classroom a little bit messed up, but maybe you don't know what it is. I would bet it's something not big. It's a couple of little things, or they tried it and it didn't work. So maybe if you take a group of folks who are sympathetic to you, who know the school leaders, and find out what the issue and problem is. And I'll tell you what, now you look at the research, which has really come out heavy in the last 3-4 years. If you aren't doing after school and summers, there's no way you're going to catch kids up. There's no way. Just let me do simple math with you. If you have a young person, 9th grade, let's say at the 7th grade level in academics, so let's say 8th grade, a year behind. So every year as they've gone along, they've been losing a month in that year's time. It might not be in school. It might be because they're disengaged after school or summers. To then expect in 1 year to make up a 1 year gain when you haven't even been making a 1 year gain is impossible. I mean, you're beating the head against the wall. So if they want to be successful, having these partnerships is a way to go, adding more time and opportunity with other caring adults. But somehow you got to find out what the barrier is, I think, and offer up maybe some partnerships that are really exciting that maybe the leadership hadn't thought about.
Did anybody else want to comment before I move on to the next thing? Okay, why don't I ask if maybe the panel could talk a little bit about the thing that Joan has mentioned, which has been something we've been obviously talking about in our state for some time, is trying to get pre-K programs going across the state as well. So we've been talking about after school, but what about the pre-K situation? You know, we've tried legislation in the state and that has not been successful. What are the solutions to that, do you think? John, go ahead.
I don't know if I can talk about solutions, but I can define the problem a little bit. I believe that there was 4 different state agencies that was dealing with pre-K, and in my 10 years in the legislature, there was several attempts to consolidate that. A lot of territorialism. And I think it comes back from the question that we had before is that there has been programs that become successful, and they've done it because they've had to wherever it was coming from. I think that we have to have a focus on pre-K to go forward, and we have to marshal the funds. I remember probably the second year in the legislature that I was there, the chairman of the education committee found out that there was over $200 million being spent on pre-K, and he had no idea where it was being spent or how it was being spent or any of that stuff. And that started probably an 8-year exploration of what's going forward on that. The other thing that I would like to comment on, again, to kind of set up the question a little bit better, is that we've had probably 3 or 4 school districts that have come forward and said that when they work in a pre-K situation with students, they come in a lot better, and then that they have a reduction in the number of students that are in special education. As a former educator, I believe that. My wife is a former first grade teacher, and she says that also. But I think what we have to do is we have to focus on K or pre-K, and get money to it, and get these people who know how to help these kids, get them help instead of finding different ways to limit their ability. Thank you.
Joan, do you have thoughts on how some of these other school districts or in areas where maybe there hasn't been as much support for this can overcome that? We need you on mute.
I'm muted. Thanks, Bob. One consideration is really, again, back to involving the community and the community partners. If you're going to tread into this water, you want to be sure that the community doesn't feel like you're doing childcare. There's a lot of childcare providers and preschool providers that make their living doing this type of work. So how do you differentiate yourself from what is already going on in the community and not create some adversarial relationships when you're really trying to do what you feel is the right thing to address the fact that in our situation in School District 1 in Carbon County was that students were not prepared to enter kindergarten if they did not have some kind of a pre-K interaction. So one of the components that I don't think I mentioned earlier was we really tried to focus on the 3 to 5 year population that wasn't interacting in any kind of formalized program anywhere else in the community. And we created an outreach program for the existing preschools in the community to help them align curriculum and activities that they were using with what the expectations would be of the district when the students hit the front door on the first day of school to take their readiness exam. And so we created a professional learning community for childcare and preschool providers to help them align their curriculums, to help them access resources. And we also utilized our Project Reach and Child Development Center so that each child was really, that was expressing an interest in participating in some kind of a pre-K readiness program, that we were fully utilizing what was available in the community first, and then really specifically saying what this program was for. And that was really to set the stage of success so that we didn't just create kind of this, what are you doing? It's competing with other things, and why is this happening? And when we started, it was small. It was just a couple of days a week. Students could participate, but they had to be accompanied by an adult, or one adult could bring 4 or 5 of the little ones with them, but they had to stay. So it didn't look like daycare. And so really just looking at what are you trying to accomplish and how can you start from a good foundation. You know, I feel like this particular model really said, we can't wait for the state or our lawmakers or decision makers to determine that this is important. We know it's important, and we're going to create a program that suits us. And we've been able to grow it and develop it so that students are there, you know, most of the day. They're taking art, they're taking PE, they're taking all of the other activities. But this has been, you know, something that has transformed over the past 4 years.
Liz, go ahead.
Not in disagreement with what Joan's saying, but in addition, I keep thinking of like parents, kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs when you're in the trenches of parenting, especially preschool age kiddos. And that is, you need childcare first, and the preschool academic experience is like the cherry on top. But some people are just looking for a warm body to watch their kids so they can go to work. And to talk about, you know, going hand in hand with this need for childcare in our state is huge. And parents, if they don't have the childcare need, a lot of the parents I work with will even say, I can't take them from the preschool. Or we even have a similar program to what Joan's describing in Sheridan called Kinder Boost. And parents come, but someone has to stay. But a lot of parents are more in that survival mode. And so how we meet them there, and we find more opportunities for licensed childcare in our communities, because it's not, at least in our community, it's not there. And when I read across the state, it seems like everyone's in the same boat. And as a parent myself, I know I've put my kids in some situations. I look back and I think, oh gosh, I'm so glad we survived that stage, because there just wasn't options for childcare. And I would have loved it to be more educational. And that is the biggest struggle in terms of getting kids ready for kindergarten, is parents are just trying their best to stay afloat.
Hey, anybody else on that? Go ahead, Joan.
Yeah, right. Liz, I'll just jump back with you. And I think that's one of the reasons we felt strongly about the outreach component, that we could only reach so many kids that might come officially to a program, and parents can't get off work to, you know, drive their kids to a program for 2 hours and stay. So how could we go to where the kids already are if they're connected with a provider, and maybe that provider isn't even doing what they feel like is preschool or pre-K, but saying, have you thought about this? Have you tried this? And having the local education experts work with them on some resources that they haven't thought about, and, you know, doing the professional learning communities and sending them back with some resources. We felt like that was equally as valuable as the students who were actually able to come in person.
Go ahead, Matt.
Bob, I wanted to just add on, and I think this is probably a given, and everybody understands this, that, and Dr. Peterson mentioned, it's such a challenge to make up time And if those pre-K programs aren't available, what's absolutely crucial is those students in really grades K3. If they aren't at grade level for reading, it spills over and the problems build upon themselves. I mean, it's speaking anecdotally, one of our greatest success stories was a student who was involved in a Cheyenne gang. Again, that's not New York City, but it was problematic. And as we surrounded her, as Joan mentioned, professional learning communities, we surrounded her with all of the interventions at the school, people that care, teachers that care, and assessed reading with all students, but her in particular. And we identified a student that we were debating that was a danger to other students, and identified that she had a 4th grade reading level, yet she was a sophomore in our high school. And so when she started having success was when she started learning how to read. So again, that early intervention, if it's not available, I think reading assessments to see where those kids are, because I think we make assumptions because they've been promoted to the 9th grade, but are they at grade level? So I think that component in your schools is a good question to ask.
I'd like to, I've been watching a sidebar conversation going on in our chat group brought by Kelly, and basically it's a question that I had when I was listening to some of you is, you know, there's going to be some budget cuts, districts are going to be worried about other things, and then how do you get out there and actually get some of these partnerships going, and especially at a time where there might be some other things folks are thinking about. So I'd be curious as to some solutions to that. Superintendent Balo.
Thanks, Bob. And I'm just going to start. I was also watching the chat a little bit and jotted down some notes, but please remember that the responsibility of our Wyoming legislature is to determine a proper and uniform education, or an equitable and adequate education for all Wyoming students, and then fund it. And so I think that that's a really good reminder, not only for our legislators as we go into this session and address not only the recalibration, which happens every 5 years, but this structural deficit that does exist, but that when we talk about our improvement, talk about school improvement, whether that's early education or higher education or K-12 education, that we consistently and constantly remind ourselves and others that we must lead with students, the conversation about students first, or children first, and then follow that with the funding. Sometimes that will result in a higher price tag. Sometimes it will result in efficiencies, but we don't get anywhere if we stop a conversation about improvement or innovation in education, if we say, how much is it going to cost? Or how do we fund this? Or we don't have the money for this. We have to continue to move forward. And, you know, it is perhaps the greatest paradox that I've been in as an elected leader, to have this structural deficit in education and understand that school districts may be facing real cuts, just like our agency and other areas of state government in Wyoming are, and then also to see this influx of the CARES funding. And while one doesn't necessarily replace the other, I do think that it's important for the participants on this call, for school district officials, for our legislators to understand that we have an obligation and opportunity and funding to move forward with some of the very innovations that we're talking about on the phone, or excuse me, on this Zoom today. And it's more complicated than saying, what is it? How does it work? Sounds great, let's fund it. But it doesn't mean that it can't be done.
Rick, can you comment on what you were talking about with Kelly about also maybe trying to reach out to some donors and that kind of thing, and seeing if there's some people that might be involved that maybe you don't immediately think about?
Absolutely. So I have a 4-year-old, and when COVID hit, we knew that our local daycare preschool was going to shut down in June, but we weren't prepared yet as a group of parents. And the group of parents that we dealt with are participated in this daycare were district teachers mainly, healthcare workers for the county and some other individuals. And when the pandemic hit in March and everything got shut down, they decided to close their doors indefinitely. So we were left without childcare March 16th of this year. And there was a group of parents, myself included, that got to brainstorming, essentially through text message, trying to figure out what are we going to do, because in Saratoga we don't have a lot of healthcare. We don't have a lot of childcare, which is seems to be the main topic of this sidebar. And we got to brainstorming. We decided that we would create a 501c3 and get a daycare up and running. And we put the word out there saying our community needs this. And if we want our community to be successful in the long run, we need to have good early childcare. And that consists of a safe place for our kids to go while parents go to work. And that also means that we need to go have an early childcare program. And we got it up and running due to local donors. But there were many local donors that didn't realize that the young families of the community needed that. And we did that through social media, general conversation. We did that with radio ads and newspaper ads. We put out a mailer. But in the case of just getting after-school programs set up, I have been very fortunate as the BOCES director to occasionally just get checks put on my desk, because I have put out a feeler saying, hey, we would really like to have an adult education painting class. I don't have funding. Does anybody care to fund this? And there's an artist here in town who is retired now, but absolutely loves this kind of stuff and will fund it. And they don't know that there's a need unless we say something. And often people are very generous to watch these projects go forward, and we just have to be brave enough to put the word out.
I have a question from Lori. I know we're going to wrap up here in just a second, but just wondered how one accesses or finds out about the CARES Act money. Can somebody answer that?
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and thanks, Lori, for that question. The guidance on the CARES 1, or the first bunch or tranche of money from last spring, is already out. There's guidance around it. And CARES 2, the guidance isn't out, but it will come out from our office as well as the governor's office. The governor's portion of the CARES funding is for, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, other educational institutions. And so it would be important for you to watch the Department of Education announcements, and we will get it out there just as soon as we have information available to us.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Peterson.
Two other things you might want to think about. One is there's something called a Child Development Block Grant funding, and people in childcare know about it. But there's a big increase also in this second bucket of stimulus money, and there may be other organizations that are eligible that were not in the past, and it's sizable money, so it might help with the startup of what you were talking about on childcare, both for young children as well as school-age children. Two other things you might think about. A huge resource, it takes some work and organization, but are high school students and college students. And you can incentivize their involvement by offering some credit and training for them to be involved in after-school, summer, and childcare programs. And that's actually a great resource to develop young people to manage other people, which is one of the big things in the new economy. So think of ways you might be able to capture the interest and excitement of high school and college students, and not running the program, but being a good staff resource. And there's many of them out there who could really benefit from that.
Michelle?
Thanks, Bob. I just wanted to add to Dr. Peterson's comment too, that the After School Alliance, which is a national policy organization, is putting together some background and information on the various funding that's coming as a part of this second stimulus money that's coming down. And we, through the After School Alliance, will have some at least some basics as it becomes available that we'll make available to everyone who's participated in these calls as well.
Sherman, can you talk real quickly? I actually did a story on this last year, I think, about foster options and transition services and housing for young adults. How often do you run into that in your high school, and how big of a problem is this?
In our community, we're finding it to be a really big problem. The only availability right now is actually for our group home beds at a crisis center, which helps out with immediate emergency placement, but doesn't do anything as far as addressing the larger issue of helping kids grow and transition. I think that that's something we run into annually in our community. I don't know if it's a statewide problem or just something that's unique to Albany County, but housing, a great deal of our students have unstable housing, and we just don't have a lot of resources. It just goes back to those community resources and removing those barriers and having kids that are getting their basic needs met and being school ready.
And as you point out, a lot of those kids have situations where they may have to go home after class and that kind of thing, and honestly can't participate in some of these after-school programs that we're all talking about.
Yeah, that's true. But I'll tell you, I mean, you're right. We usually talk about after school in the context of younger students, but when we do, I do some homework help. I do some video game club, and it's fascinating. It just turns into social emotional learning and fellowship because there are not a lot of opportunities. There's no place for kids to go in our community, or few places for kids to go in our community. Especially when transportation is an issue and things like that. So we're constantly trying to think of ways to support their overall well-being and their desire to come to school.
Well, this is easy. This doesn't make anyone's stomach churn. Superintendent Balo, you've got all the solutions for this. I'm sure you've written all this down, and as we look forward to the next few months, I'm sure we can solve all of these problems.
I'm laughing behind the mute button. I wish, but together I think we have many of the solutions, and I think that the most important solution is that there is not a silver bullet. This is hard work, it's important work, and there are lots of small solutions that move the ball forward for kids in Wyoming.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's a very interesting discussion, and I'm told this will be available. It's being recorded, so you can go back and watch this and certainly share this with others. Michelle, some final thoughts from you.
I just want to thank all of our participants, Superintendent Balo, Dr. Peterson, and our panelists. I just think this was a really rich beginning to a conversation, and I look forward to continuing it and working together in communities. We'll continue to keep everyone posted. We want to thank our sponsors and Bob and Wyoming Public Media for their support, and thanks to all of you for participating. We'll be sort of focusing next week on adolescence and the opportunity of adolescence and what we can really think about as it relates to some of these conversations. So I'll look forward to others participating as well next week. Oh, Jillian. And next week, actually, one of our special guests presenters is Tony Smith, the former superintendent of public instruction for the state of Illinois, who's a great friend of Jillian's. So we'll look forward to having him join us. Thanks, everybody.